Hi, this is a really quick presentation on easy data analytics using the Google GSuite products. I have previously given a presentation on extreme spreadsheets where I reference some of what I've done here. So this is a cut down version of what I demonstrated there and using examples where I've removed all of my personal data. So you can see the exact details of the code that I'm using without me revealing any personal information. So there's four key products that I'm using and they're all chained together, but you can use them too. So we'll go through them. There are four easy steps. The first one is Google Forms. So the benefit of this is it provides data validation. Just through a series of clicks, you can essentially create a custom app because you can bookmark the form and keep that on your phone. Most data collection apps are just a glorified form. So that's pretty cool that you can essentially do custom software development. Let's go have a look. So here is, I've set up a clean Gmail account and I've gone and created my finances folder to keep all my personal finances nice and tidy. What I've gone and done is created three Google Forms. So every time I want to go track what I'm spending on fuel, this is the schema of the data that I'm using. And anytime I want to track an expense, this is also the schema. I'll go into this in a bit more detail shortly. And then also my utility bills. This is the schema that I'm using as well. So this makes it pretty easy to, yep, I'm doing a gas bill. It is due on the 26th and it is 140.55. Submit. Actually, let's just do that for the sake of it. Cool. So now, for the sake of personal finances, these forms make it easy to do data collection for things that are variable expenses. If we collect all the variable expenses, we can figure out what the distribution of those expenses are and be able to do a bit of forecasting. But we've built in a bit of data validation for ourselves, and we can share this with family, loved ones, and it makes it a bit easier for them to go and collect this data for us too, because we're all data nerds here. Fuel tracker, again, what type of fuel we're using, the odometer reading, how many liters to get a full refill, and how much we spent. With that, how much we spent and the number of liters, that we can figure out the cost of liters. With the odometer readings, the difference between the odometer readings, we can figure out how much distance between refuels. I've got the date is optional because every time you save a response with a Google form, it gives you a timestamp. So we can actually just leverage, if I'm recording these values at the time that I record fuel or car expenses, then I'll just use that date stamp. But if I need a backdate data, I can provide a date to go back over it. So this is all fine and dandy on how I would use it. Let's go into car expenses, responses. So this is the section where I go and say, hey, for each of these responses, don't save them in Google Forms itself, save them in Google Sheets. And for each of these, the responses, well, it does have some data here, but I've linked all of them to the same Google Sheet. Which brings me to our second step, Google Sheets. So we can collect a variety of different forms of data, but having it all in one spot for analysis makes it so much easier. Plus, we've got the power of spreadsheets, which is amazing. And with it being the G Suite, you can easily share it with loved ones and have data-driven decisions, and everyone's on the same page, but it's the exact same data. And if they want to audit the calculations because I think your math's a bit hokey, everyone's got power to jump to those cells and see what it is. Okay, so this is, we can see down the bottom here, let's get rid of those files that I've downloaded, the utilities responses, car expense responses, and fuel tracker responses. This is the raw data. So this is that gas bill that we've just put in. So this is the timestamp for when I've submitted this data. but here's the due date. And then I can track all these over time, and then over the span of a year, I can see how much we're spending on gas, electricity, land rates, strata, etc. The fuel tracker responses, I've got two entries here, and this is where it gets a bit interesting because I've put these backdated. So I've recorded both of these tonight on the 10th of May, but I've backdated them to the 6th of May and 28th of April. So now this is where I get my dashboard, and I go, the date is using this array formula, and this is where the power of spreadsheets is really awesome. If there's an overwritten response in B2, use that one. Otherwise, default to the timestamp. That's cool, so that's how we can easily, and I only need to put this array formula in once. We'll see that it essentially autofills. So as we add more data, it'll automatically populate it. I don't need to add and keep dragging in autofill. We're good to go. Distance. We can see that we go get the values from C3 minus the previous one from the odometer readings. Fuel economy, we go and calculate, what have we got? The number of litres for every 100 kilometres. And as I was saying before, the cost per litre, that's linked to the other sheet, is essentially, well, the cost per litres divided. So that's pretty cool. Being able to track all these things and all the power spreadsheets to automate and see what's going on. Now, let's get on to the third step, Google Drive. So all of these are saved in Google Drive. You have all the sharing facilities available where it's like I want to give access to my spouse or loved ones that they can view it or they can collaborate and edit the document. So we're on the same page about our finances. But you can also do arbitrary data files. So I'm talking about this from the point of view of like personal finances, but you could do this for like other analytics or research or homework assignments or whatever applies to you, or if you want to use this in the workplace. You can arbitrary data files, and this is probably going to be a straight segue into the fourth one, Google Colab. So Google Colaboratory, you've got all the power of Python. It's a no fuss environment that Google gives you free compute, and it pre-installs Python with a whole heap of common data analytics libraries. It uses the Jupyter style of notebook interface, so you can interactively program and explore data. And as we'll see, that we're going to easily pull together all the data from Google Sheets and Google Drive and interact and saving those back. So we've got the power of all the spreadsheets formulas that we've previously known, but also Python as well. So there is no limits to what analytics we can do now. So let's go have a look at that. So as we saw here in Google Drive, this is where it saves those forms in the finances Google Sheet. But in my raw data, this is some synthetic data that I've created from a different project on house prices. So it's just a folder full of CSVs. Each of them has about 1,000 rows of just synthetic house pricing data. So let's have a look at one. Yeah. So there's 3 columns. It just has an arbitrary price, the number of bedrooms it has, and the floor space in meters squared. So let's go and have a look at what this looks like in Google Colab. I'm going to disconnect and delete that runtime. Yes. View. Edit. Yeah, clear all outputs. That's what I wanted. So let's start from the top. Let's go reconnect. So what this is doing is it's spinning up some compute space in the Google Cloud. It's a free tier. But it still gives a generous amount of disk and compute memory. So this is the code to get Google Colab to go and connect to Google Drive. Yes, so this is using OAuth and single sign-on to go and authenticate and get the credentials to authenticate between the different systems. Yep. So Google Colab has now got access to my Google Drive. When it's ready, cool, mounted, supposedly. There we go. So I've got Drive, my Drive, um, finances, raw data. So this is my folder of CSVs that we're talking about. So now we have all the power of Python. So we're going to use the OS operating system command to go and list the files in a directory. So even though this is Google Drive, it's treating it as like a local file system. Pretty cool. Cool. And that's a list of CSVs. This is, I think, it's a bit tricky. What's inside here is what's called a list comprehension. There's a really nice Real Python article that explains list comprehensions. It's a nice feature of Python. But what it's essentially doing is we have a list of strings in file names. So it's going to iterate through each of them and call it file name. So for each of them, we're going to get the drive path and concatenate the file name onto that. And get pandas to read that file, parse any dates if there are any. What I'm actually going to do is sneakily add an extra column called file name. So what will happen inside here, there'll be 3 pandas data frames because it has 1 for each file. The PD concat will smush all of those files together into one. Let's go have a look. See? So we had those 3 files. There was 1,000 rows in each, so there's 3,000 rows. But we added this 4th column. So we can now see that each row, which file it came from, as we've loaded it. Pretty cool. So I've done this in 2 steps. You can get the list of files and concatenate it all together. But if you want to do it all in 1 step, you can just put the list directory inside the list comprehension. Cool. Now, we want to connect to Google Sheets. So we need a library called GSpread. GSpread. So this is a Python library. And inside there, let's go and install it. So GSpread's not automatically installed in one of these Google Colaboratory things, so we just need to go and install it. And if we look at the documentation, this is how it recommends to connect Google Colaboratory to have, essentially what it's doing is like inside Google Colaboratory, you are a Google authenticated user. So get me, and then using a Google Auth, go and get the credentials, and then pass that into the GSpread library. So then we'll have a Google context. With that context, then we can go talk to Google Drive and Google Sheets to get our spreadsheets. That was a lot. Essentially all we're doing is we're authenticating and logging in. So this library has permission to do stuff. Cool. See, so we need to explicitly allow, again, me, cool, allow. All right, we're now logged in. Now, because it's logged in, it knows that it's my Google Drive and I'm looking for a Google Sheet called Finances. Inside that Finances spreadsheet, I want the worksheet specifically called Fuel Tracker Responses, which is this one. So it should have one. So it's 6 columns and 2 rows. Cool. Let's come back here. So what we do, once we get that worksheet, we want to go and get all the values out of that worksheet, but load it as a pandas data frame. Cool. There we go. So the timestamps of when I've created those records, but then the backdated dates, fuel types, odometer readings, and now, because there's a pandas data frame, we can do whatever we want to it. That's pretty cool. Now, back to this house prices data frame, because this is just arbitrary data. Just to make sure there's no tricks up my sleeve, let's go have a look. I've created a house prices worksheet. It is empty. So I'm going to, from my finances spreadsheet, get the house prices worksheet, and then use the update command. So this is that data frame that we loaded earlier, and if you look at how to use the GSuite library, this is how you go and update a worksheet with data from a pandas data frame. Just go run that. Cool, that gives us confirmation. And it's affected A1 to D3001. Let's go check that out. Cool, there's all our data. And that's it. We've covered how, if you want to manually collect data, if you want to go and have arbitrary files that you're just chucking into Google Drive, how to collate that all into spreadsheets, go and do your own analysis and manipulation via a spreadsheet, how to connect Google Colaboratory to Google Drive or to any of your Google Sheets and get them into pandas data frames. Again, pandas data frames. And then you have all the power of Python in a Google Colaboratory context. And you can always save that data back to Google Drive or Google Sheets. And that closes the loop on all your analytics needs. That's all I've got, and thank you for watching.